Your mind talks all day long, planning, worrying, judging, regretting. But what if the biggest misunderstanding in your life is believing that the voice is you? Welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where we explore how understanding your nervous system can transform the way you live, love, and relate. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and each week I am joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lassard. Hey, Steve, how many of your thoughts do you believe?
Hey, Jeffrey, far too many of them. I am so excited about the topic this week. This is also very much at the cutting edge of like what I'm trying to navigate. So hopefully by the end of this, I may believe a fewer of my thoughts. How are you doing?
I'm really well.
Where do you want to go? What entryway in do you want to take here? This was your topic this week, and this is something that you wanted to share. Do you sort of want to set the table for us of maybe what we're going to be talking about and why it has your attention?
Yeah. I think there's a variety of strengths in approaching this topic. One is that most of us spend the majority of our lives in our head thinking. And we often take what our thoughts say as truth about the world or about us. And while there can be certainly a good amount of helpful thoughts, anticipating things, reminding us to prepare and get ready, those kinds of things, a certain proportion of our thoughts can actually increase our suffering, our struggle, our unhappiness. They can at times make us feel like we're almost imprisoned by our thoughts or our worries or our looping. So from that alone, paying attention to something that we kind of live with and overlook can be very helpful. But the other reason is that actually paying attention to our thinking can give us tremendous insight about the state of our nervous system in the moment. We don't have to just rely on body sensations. We can actually listen to the quality of thoughts or the narration in our head to get a more precise idea about how we're really doing inside.
Where my thinking mind gets stuck is like, isn't that me in there? Like, aren't I the one talking to me about like, oh no, don't do that, or don't touch that, or don't say that, or you should do this, or like, that's me, right?
Well, that's what almost all of us believe. That's why it is so compelling, right? That here's a neurological piece to this too, that familiarity supports the idea that it must be true. So if you hear that the sky is brown 10,000 times, you may start believing the sky is brown. And if you start hearing 10,000 times that you're not quite good enough, you're going to believe that. But we then tend to believe almost all of our thoughts. And we also have this tendency to identify with them. That's what you're saying. It's really easy to do that. It's supported by our development. It's supported by culture's use of language. That language is the way that we connect with each other a lot of times, and it's the way we describe ourselves in the world. But we think that we're thinking our thoughts. And the truth is, most of the time we're not.
Well, I wanted to go into this. I interrupted you. I don't know if you had some examples you wanted to go to.
I was going to give us a little experiment.
Yeah, let's do that. I like experiments.
So just let's take a moment here and just watch for the next thought to arrive. What did you notice?
I was thinking about dinner for some reason.
Right.
When you said that, I immediately went to like, I wonder what I'm going to have for dinner tonight.
Right. So you went to something, and did you feel like you chose that thought?
No. Just kind of popped in front of the screen.
Right. That's the whole thing. Right. That our thinking, truthfully, is a useful way that I use sometimes with people is our mind thinking thoughts, which it does all the time, is very similar to our heart beating. It's just beating. Our mind is doing what it's supposed to do. It's just running on its own. but it's running independent of us. We think all these thoughts are ours, but they're actually these spontaneous things like, I wonder what's for dinner. And, oh, what's that girl's name from junior high? And what was that mystery sandwich we would have? Like, we jump around and go, but we're not directing it. And sometimes it's just a simple experiment like that to see and watch for the next thought. You can kind of say, I didn't choose to think of this. This just comes up. And if we can begin to see that thinking is a process versus something that's intentionally done most of the time. I mean, we can intentionally think about something. Let's think about this trip, right? We plan the trip. But most of our thoughts during the day are these thoughts about judgment. Um, Recent research, the old urban legend has said that we had 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. A 2020 study from, I think, King's College was able to break it down to about 6,000 thoughts a day. But 95 to 96% of those thoughts are repeats and variations of earlier thoughts. It's not like you have 6,000 novel thoughts a day. You have about 96% similar, repetitive, theme-oriented thoughts every day, and maybe 4% of your 6,000 thoughts are novel to that particular day. But we're creating thoughts all the time, and each time we create them, we enter into the world of the thought. That's what's tricky here, right? We don't see thoughts, as events. We see them as descriptions of reality or descriptions of the truth about us, right? Like, I'm a bad person, or that's unfair, or I don't like that. All these thoughts that come up, even though they're spontaneous, we tend to claim ownership. And there's something called a narrative self, which is we have a capacity to string together all these thoughts and give us the illusion that we're one continuous self across all time. The truth is we're varying moment to moment, day to day, especially if you understand a nervous system perspective. We're not the exact same person every day, even though we may try to be. We're actually a little different each day in terms of some of the thoughts we have, but most of what we do, most of what we think, and most of our behavior is ritualized in some way to become repeated day after day. And this is because the nervous system likes efficiency. So just like the nervous system, it's too tedious for us to learn how to walk each day. Once we learn how to walk, the nervous system puts it on automatic pilot. You don't have to think about walking. You just get up and walk across the room. It wants to do this with every single thing you do. Your drive to work, making breakfast, the way you fill out a report, the way you greet some of your friends on the phone, all the habits. Your mind wants to make it as efficient as possible and keep it as same as possible because the nervous system likes predictability.
So within that predictability, me thinking about like, what am I going to have for dinner in a moment of silence? Might not be the most productive thing I can do in that moment as I'm present with my friend here recording this podcast. But like, it's not necessarily harmful.
No, you're right. It's not at all harmful. It's and we all of us think, automatically, right? Each of us may have some moments of thinking intentionally and creatively, but that's not the majority of our thoughts. And it's not wrong to think. Our brain naturally does that. Let me explain a couple of reasons why, by the way. The brain is extremely well suited for something called pattern recognition. So we learn things that fit a pattern. And I think I've used this example before. Say I was harmed by a guy that had a mustache. Then in my life, I may see men with a mustache and get a little uncomfortable or nervous or feel like I have to not be in their presence. And so the nervous system learned that something, a mustache, was associated with a negative event. And it learns to look at patterns. Okay, so a mustache could be dangerous. It was dangerous in the past. And so I'm reacting to that. But I'm reacting to that out of my awareness. But once I've moved into a state, then we enter state driving story. Now, thinking about dinner is not necessarily stressful, it's just occupying your mind. But if instead you started thinking about an argument you had with your partner, or a terrible auto accident you were in as a kid, or the moment that your father passed away in your arms, that all of a sudden, if you were going to those places, it would be stirring up and continue to stir up a state, right, of sorrow, despair, fear, anger, grief. And that's where our thinking, if unattended to, can actually help us dive deeper and deeper into a painful state. Right? Remember, the nervous system is not interested in you being happy. It's interested in keeping you alive. So thinking is almost always sorted around survival issues, trying to see if you're safe, trying to anticipate danger, trying to plan for danger. That's what a lot of our thinking is. One other thing I want to say about this is that when we're not otherwise directly engaged, a part of the brain turns on called the default mode network. And this is the part of the brain that we can enter when we're idling, when we're not devoting our full intention and full engagement with a project, a person, a thing. This is why mind wandering when you drive or take a shower or brush your teeth or do the dishes, it allows us to have thoughts that come in. But these thoughts, dictated by the default mode network, tend to be all self-referential and all concerned about our safety. Do those people not like me? Did I say something wrong? Was I too reactive? Was I not nice enough? We won't do these in the moment when we're interacting with people. We'll do these when we're on the default mode network, when that's active, when we're driving away from the conversation or taking a shower the next morning, and then these thoughts will come up. Those are the places where we end up feeling worse. Our thinking can help drive us deeper into a defensive state that creates more pain, more conflict, more unhappiness for us, more shame.
I'm wondering if there's a quality of thought that we might start to recognize that's like, oh, that's being driven by my state.
So thinking is state dependent. So if we can pay attention to the quality of the thoughts, or even more sensitively, to the quality of the narration, to the voice in our head that's narrating, and we pay attention to both what it's saying and the felt tone of this voice in our head, it changes, right? So when I'm in shame, it feels like a younger, desperate voice that's screaming at me to stop doing what I'm doing, or that what I did was wrong and I'm horrible and whatever it is, right? So by paying attention, by being able to actually stop and notice our thoughts, get curious about them, we are gently stepping out of the stream of thinking for a moment and turning with our awareness and actually becoming aware of what we're thinking. We're not just thinking it, we're aware that we're thinking. And we can pay attention to the qualities of it. And so for most people, like I said, there's about 6,000 thoughts a day. But the research also showed, and my clinical experience showed this too, is that most people have anywhere from 10 to 15 themes that all of their thoughts, or most of their thoughts, revolve around. Like shame can be a theme. So for many people, that's like one of the main themes. So self-criticism and concern about other people judging them, and fear about being too much or not enough. So we can identify the thoughts both by themes and also by the feelings and tones that we get with them. So when we're in fight or flight, we feel usually an abundance of energy, but we feel a desperate need to do something. We can't just hang out and sit. We have to run away, figuratively or literally, or we need to engage in something to make something happen or change something. That's kind of like fight energy as well. And that's really what's predominant. And if we're in sympathetic activation, our minds will move faster, our thinking will be faster, um, and thoughts will be much more about danger. They will be much more about vulnerability or risk or unsafety, and we'll be feeling, again, some urge to get away, to distract ourselves, to pay attention to something else, or to fight or resist what's going on. Anytime we pick up those hints, that's an indicator that our thoughts and our nervous system are coming from a sympathetic state of fight or flight. In contrast, if I'm in shutdown and collapse, my thoughts will be about withdrawing, tired, I can't, I give up, it's too much, I'm hopeless, I'm powerless, I just have to get away, I have to stop this, I can't go on. And when we feel that kind of despair, hopelessness, darkness, um, impotence, that's an indicator that we're in shutdown and collapse. Then finally, if we're able to notice that our thoughts are flexible, that I can think of different perspectives, I can see an issue or a problem, but from different perspectives instead of just one, that I can be interested in other people's opinions or views on stuff and not feel so threatened about my own. There's room for two different opinions or two different ways of seeing things. If I feel that I can be more connected with me and more connected with you during our conversation or with my thoughts, then that's all indicative I'm more in that zone of regulation. So the quality of our thoughts, fast and furious, slow and very muddy. So fast and furious is sympathetic, slow, muddy, almost not thinking, that's more that shutdown and collapse. When we can be aware of what we're thinking and feeling, that's one sign that we're in ventral. When we don't have to take our thoughts so seriously, but actually can see our thoughts as thoughts, it's another indicator we're in regulation. So one of the ways from a nervous system perspective is we look at thoughts as information that tell us about our state, which is telling us how we're doing, how we're feeling. And it can also let us know where we are on the map so that we could then engage practices that help us shift back towards regulation. Because I'm going to use different practices if I'm in shutdown and collapse than I would use if I'm in high sympathetic activation. They would call for different types of breathing or somatic practices than the ones for shutdown and collapse. So it helps us know what tools we might use, but it begins to give us space, right? One analogy that's both from contemplative traditions and some cognitive psychology traditions is the idea that the open mind is like the sky. It's vast, it's open, it's clear. Thoughts are like clouds. Some clouds are beautiful, some clouds are dark and stormy, some clouds can barely be seen there. But we, like that image, we react to the clouds. We get stormy with the clouds. We get gray with the clouds. We go where the clouds are, directed by the thoughts. We lose perspective that we're actually the sky. If you can be aware of your thoughts, the moment that you can be aware of your thoughts, you have separated from over identifying with your thoughts as truth or as truth about you. And you can begin to see them for what they are, thoughts, mental events that happen for everybody, right? But don't in and of themselves necessarily hold truth.
The part of me that's done a lot of inner work and a lot of spiritual work and attended retreats totally gets it. You know, I've sat in those meditations of mind like sky and watching them. Where I get stuck and where I imagine others get stuck is like I don't know, sort of saying like, yeah, okay, but like I got to pick the kids up and my mother-in-law's sick and um, I don't feel competent and qualified to doing this project that I've got to do. I don't know, there's kind of like a rubber meets the road moment that I've seen in my life, and I'm intuiting people are sharing like, yeah, okay. I mean, I've heard I've heard the Buddhist sutras share that mind like sky analogy, but like, what about me? And and maybe what I'm hearing is just like we can overcomplicate it. We can overcomplicate that the getting to the disidentification of with the thoughts is some like mental gymnastics that we're not capable of. I guess that's what comes to mind.
Right. Again, what I'll say gently, right? And that's very common, I hear too. What I also say often is, well, that's a thought. It's a thought that this will be really hard for me. It's a thought. And again, it's predicted upon other experiences where you may have had challenge or struggles with this, right? And so it may be that a thought is, I'm powerless over my thoughts. But that's a thought. That's not reality. That may be something we try to believe, but just because we believe it doesn't mean it's true. It just means it's something that feels true enough for us to believe, but it doesn't actually speak to its actual veracity, its actual truthfulness or factualness. So all of us are over-identified with thinking. All of us are. And all of us are in some ways addicted to thinking. We do it all the time. And the more dysregulated we do, the more thinking we do. And the more dysregulated we get, the more that we spin trying to find a way to fix our dysregulation or fix the external problem or fix the world, whatever is the source of our feeling unsafe. But we spend so much time in our thoughts and stressing over them, feeling unsafe and feeling not knowing where to go and trying again to solve everything from a mental perspective, that for the most part, nothing gets solved from there. We just get kind of tied up in knots. Because thoughts in and of themselves are not going to necessarily regulate your nervous system. And often thoughts are a component of what helps dysregulate a nervous system. We've said state drives story, right? We start thinking thoughts that are resonant with the state we're in. So if I'm in an angry state, I'm going to have angry thoughts. I'm not going to have happy thoughts or funny thoughts or thoughts about making dinner. I'm going to have thoughts about getting even or how I was wronged or something else. That's the reality I'm going to be in. And as long as I'm in that reality and as long as I'm having thoughts about that reality, my whole experience then is one of suffering and anger and kind of collapsing in on me. If I can begin to see thoughts as thoughts, I begin to have a little bit of space, right? The part of you that's thinking the thought is not necessarily an essential and authentic part of you, but the part of you that can be aware of the thought, that can be aware of thinking the thought, that's closer to who you actually are. The capacity to be aware of that process is more integrated and more closer to the essential you than to this thought that's a random event, just like a heartbeat is. It's not totally random, but it's not under our conscious control. And the thoughts themselves are really just keeping an active brain active. What's interesting, Steve, is that when we help nervous systems feel safer, thinking naturally slows. Because if someone's been in sympathetic and they're thinking fast and hard and long and kind of walled in by their thoughts, and we help them slow down just a bit, they'll find that the rate of thinking slows. The intensity and desperation of the thoughts themselves weaken, become calmer. And that's without doing anything other than relaxing a little bit into regulation. So we don't ever try to stop thoughts. That's counterproductive, and you'll just make more thoughts flourish. The idea is to begin to see that we don't have to be hijacked by thoughts, right? Another way of thinking about it is thoughts are like a train on a track, right? They just keep going. You can see yourself standing at a railroad crossing and seeing all the cars drive by, right? And if you're noticing, you may even notice the little bit of light that comes out between each car on the train, right? Between each freight car, there's a little bit of light that comes through in the separation. As we slow down, we can begin to almost watch our thoughts like that. What we usually do is the first thought that goes by on the train, we jump on board. And then 5-10 miles down the road, we go, whoa, I'm down here. I was back in my car. I want to get back there. We jump on a thought and we ride it, which is totally natural. It's not wrong. But that's what keeps us unconscious about our thinking. We just end up thinking the thought, being in the thought, instead of being able to take a small step back and just notice, oh, I'm really engaged in this thought, right? I'm thinking about dinner, or I'm really thinking about politics, or I'm really thinking about my future, or I'm really thinking about health. And when we go there, we get all absorbed in it. Again, in and of itself, it's not bad. It's not morally wrong or right. It's a quality, though, of if we want to spend less time suffering, less time being alienated from ourselves, then one really powerful step is to begin to just look at thoughts as events, right? Because once we begin to see them, we begin to see how this has directed and guided our experience of ourself and the world since we were born.
I find, as I'm hearing you share this, that I'm doing like a little mental inventory of the times, my life, my day, my week, where the quality of my thoughts is fundamentally different, or where I maybe step outside of that discursive mind. And I notice moments like when I'm in a flow state, the quality and spaciousness feels to open up. Or when I'm outside, when I'm in nature, I realize that, that's a place where I'm noticing those openings and it's interesting as you're also sharing, like I'm realizing sometimes when I'm in nature, I'm in very challenging circumstances because of some of the activities I do. So I'm actually thinking a lot about safety or conditions or what's going on, but it's not, Steve, you're bad at this. Steve, what's wrong with you? Steve, is anybody ever going to like you? I don't know what any of the stories I'll tell myself. Fundamentally, the quality in those flow states, or those states that I'm engaged in activity, they're fundamentally different.
Yes. And your thinking then is tailored, right? So there's some fight or flight going on when you're on the seas and it's rough and you're in your kayak. But you've also done this enough that you have strong access, right, to your capacity to remain regulated in tense situations and to also be aware of the things that a competent kayaker needs to be aware of. So you track all those. But you're right, there's not an extra voice of, oh, you suck at this, or boy, this would be a horrible picture, or just wait till other people see you, or something like that, which when that's very suffering oriented thinking, and that's not helpful, that kind of critical, judgmental, evaluative thinking about ourselves. But notice that it really doesn't erupt when the reality dictates there's not much space for it. Because in those moments, you're not going to activate the default mode network. You're going to remain focused and engaged because you need to for your safety. And that helps contain our drifting thinking towards judgment, towards self-reference, towards how we're coming across, how are people liking us. That gets engaged when we're not in C, when we're not actively engaged in something that really takes our attention. When we're able to be a little mindless, then we automatically go to these frequently recycled thoughts around these frequently used themes, about judgment or adequacy or struggles. And those are the parts that keep strengthening our identity with being a problem, that there's something wrong with us. And the more that we think it, the more it seems true. Oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh, there's something wrong with me. And if you say that for like 10 or 15 years, you're going to certainly believe that you're a problem. But as long as we identify with being a problem, it actually limits the kind of life we can have. Because I'm not thinking about the life I could have. I'm thinking about that I'm too much of a problem to have a good life, period, or I'm always the problem. And as long as I believe that, and we believe our thoughts, then we do create this self-imposed limit of how much we can be happy, how much we can heal, how much we can change our life, how much are we allowed and entitled to change, to grow, to be happier, to be calmer, more peaceful, more connected.
It reminds me of like Michael Singer's work here quite a bit, who in his work through surrender and letting go, reminds us to not take it personally, to not, like I've had a chance to work with Michael in my career, and I had a beautiful moment of being at his temple, his ashram, late after the service, the evening. He pulls out a pair of binoculars, and we look at Andromeda Galaxy together. And he, his sort of phrase is like, and you think like whatever that story you're telling in your head matters when that thing is sitting out there spinning around, right? Like, so this is coming up for me now. This, like, also there's an impersonal side of it. Like it's not necessarily against us, our thinking, our thoughts, the universe, letting go, surrendering. We have such a way of making it about us.
Yes. Yes. And again, that's for survival. A couple of things too. Our mind will stick more towards, I think Rick Hansen said it this way. Negative thoughts and judgments are like Velcro. Positive experience and thoughts are like Teflon. They slip off us. We are primed to hold on to and prioritize negative events and negative evaluations, because missing something that could be dangerous could be fatal. Missing something that could be positive would be just missing something. It wouldn't shorten our life, wouldn't put us in danger. We just might miss something nice. But for survival, that's not as important as making sure you don't get eaten, you don't get killed, right? So negative thoughts, negative judgments are the things we will remember and think about much more than positive things, which is why when we go into the default mode network, it has a negativity bias. It tends to focus on things that are negative from our past, negative in our present, or something negative in our future. We don't, when we're in the default mode network, we're not thinking optimistically or hopefully or excitedly.
Jeffrey, what do you want people to walk away with after listening or watching this episode? What do you hope they hold on their heart or take with them?
A profoundly powerful step towards giving us much greater freedom and better access to ease is to begin to see our thoughts as events, like the heartbeat. They're events that are occurring. They're not personal. They're not necessarily true. And they aren't who we are. And if people can begin to see through this lens, it really begins to open up possibilities for us and decrease shame and judgment. So everyone thinks. We're not trying to stop our thinking, but we can begin to come to a different relationship with thoughts where we can see them for what they are. Sometimes they're helpful. Sometimes they're enjoyable. Sometimes they bring more suffering. But in any case, they are not necessarily at all the truth, and certainly not the truth about us. That's where most people get stuck. And most people have intense suffering over that. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk about it today, because in our work, in my work in particular, it's there is such a bouncing back and forth between people's experience and then the thinking about it. And sometimes the thinking about it is where people can get into trouble afterwards. They can evaluate it, judge it. Oh, that wasn't good enough, or I didn't maintain that long enough, or there I go, start thinking those bad things about me again. I'm wrong. Instead of, oh, I'm just noticing when my mind is quieter and when it's noisier. And when it's noisier, what are the kinds of things it's thinking about?
Well, this was a fun journey today into this question that you wanted to cover. But we also, on this podcast, answer questions from the audience. And there are a few ways they can send those in to us. And Jeffrey, I'm wondering if you can let us know how to do that and also
Sure.
where people can learn more about you and this work.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. So if you'd like to send a question, and we would love you to if you're up for it, you can call 866-357-5156 and leave a voicemail. If you can't reach our number from an international phone number, feel free to send an audio file attached to an email, or if you can't do an audio file, just an email, and send that to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. I also have a free gift on the website that goes into a bit more depth about the nervous system perspective and also gives you some exercises, practices that you can engage whichever state that you're in. You can find that by going to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, LINKS, and that'll take you to a page where you'll see, among other things, a free gift. Just click on that. That'll take you right to the video. Steve, as always, it is a pleasure. I enjoy sort of thinking through these things and speaking through these things with you. And I always learn something. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. This was a fun conversation, and I find I learn tons each time we get to sit down and talk together. So thank you for that. And on behalf of the audience, thank you for sharing your insight and wisdom with us.
Thank you. Remember that this podcast is for informational purposes only and isn't a substitute for professional healthcare. If you are struggling, please reach out to a qualified healthcare professional. Thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time, bye for now.